All right. Hello, hello. To Dynamite fans, to Disney fans everywhere. This is so exciting. I couldn't be more excited to have the incredible Tad Stones and Greg Weisman here today to discuss the biggest new crossover that's coming your way. It's Gargoyles and Darkwing Duck. It's I think it's pretty mind blowing. I don't know about you guys.
Well, let's put it this way: it was something I never expected to happen.
Not even, or you
Well,
know
it's
what? I
not.
think
Yeah, it's not like I think of, ooh, who could Darkwing team up with? Well, I wrote Hellboy comics. I could team them. It's like things like that just don't happen. And to me, Gargoyles is such a contained, serious universe, at least compared to the other stuff we did in the Disney afternoon. So it wasn't automatically that I was going to pitch, hey, let's have the ducks visit the gargoyles. So, but it's been fun.
do we want to go back in time a little bit, back to those Disney afternoon days? Because have you guys known each other since the beginning of both your shows
Only
back on
since
Disney?
1989.
1989.
Yeah, I started at Disney TV Animation in 1989. Tad had already been there for, I don't know how long, Tad, about 2 years. I mean, the division
I mean,
didn't start much before then.
yeah. The Actually, I've never bothered remembering the year of the first year of the division. I started at Disney in 1974. Started in features. Did some time at Imagineering, working in Epcot Center. Bounced back to some live action TV. And did some specials, and ended up in Michael Eisner's living room with a bunch of other people talking about the possibilities of Disney getting into TV animation. Um, and that was technically, I started as an executive too, a creative manager, and that's in some ways that's what Greg did, because I was kind of his first assignment when he got to Disney, or Darkwing was, I should say.
Well, Double O Duck was.
Well, that's true. If you're going to
Right.
be technical about it, we will.
Yeah, so I started at Disney in '89 as a junior executive, and my immediate boss was a guy named Bruce Cranston, who 4 days after I arrived, left on what was supposed to be a 2-week trip to Europe to help to check on the status of the new studios that we were putting together in France and England. And I guess when he got there, both studios were in crisis. And so his 2-week trip became a 6-month trip. And suddenly I was thrust in the position of being the acting head of development after 4 days worth of experience. And I didn't know what the hell I was doing, but the head of the division, a guy named Gary Kreisel, said, "Well, just follow Tad around. Follow Tad around." And so I followed Tad around while he was developing Darkwing Duck and or Double O Duck, which eventually became Darkwing Duck.
Yeah, I set out with Darkwing. The big difference of that show was I'd done, like I say, started as an executive that lasted about just a few months, I think, and then suddenly was story editor, co-producer on the third season of Gummy Bears. Then ended up running Chippendale's Rescue Rangers under a ridiculous schedule and lack of personnel. And Darkwing was the first time I really felt like, although I had been ordered to do a specific thing, Double O Duck, obviously a spy show. Eventually, Darkwing, very early on, became the show that was really to my taste, because we pitched it with a different kind of a tone for Disney at the time, where he'd break the fourth wall, and it was closer to old Warner Brothers shorts, but with Disney heart. So it was actually great when Greg was assigned to us, because Greg's background, he had been an associate editor and writer at DC Comics. And once Darkwing moved from Double O Duck to Darkwing Duck, um, it was, it opened the doors to the comics I grew up with, which was arguably the silliest stage of superhero comics, the Silver Age, when Jimmy Olsen would turn into a giant turtle, or the Flash would grow a beard or turn into a marionette. And Greg knew all the references and could have input, about the show. So his notes were more than just, what the typical notes. It was like he could add. He knew the background of all those, super characters from all the companies that we could play around with in parody and Darkwing. So it was great. So it was a learning experience for Greg, but we were happy to add his input.
It was a lot of fun.
Once Gargoyles got going, like, because Disney Afternoon was such a thing, you had all the staple shows on there. I'm wondering, were all the heads of the shows always talking with each other and saying how the other's doing? And
No.
Yeah.
Okay.
None of us had time for that.
Well, I was just gonna say, yeah.
I mean, we did. I think when Gargoyles was going on, by that time, Ted, were you on Aladdin during Gargoyles? I can't remember.
Yeah, I think that would be it. Yeah.
But we were doing in season 2 of Gargoyles 52 episodes on a 10-month sliding schedule. We had done 13 episodes on that schedule in season 1, and it had been challenging. And then in season 2, we were doing 52 episodes in the same time frame, and there wasn't time to touch base with anybody, frankly.
Just
I mean, when you're in development, that's a little different, because
Right,
then you
yeah.
grab people where you could to get input. And that's what was nice at the early days of Disney TV animation. They hired artists and writers on staff. And if they thought these are strong people, they'd sign them to a multi-year contract, which was great for the artists and writers, because you got that sense of security. Great for the producers, because you didn't have your staff, worrying about where they were going to work next while they're supposed to be concentrating on your show. But that also allowed you to bring in people to brainstorm if you could grab them. That certainly happened when my first pitch again on Double O Duck was just a straight James Bond parody, and Jeffrey Katzenberg, who was the executive who basically ordered me to do the spinoff because he liked the title, just had me do it over. And I was able to bring in people just to maybe brainstorm a new direction. And one of the guys on staff, Dwayne Capizzi, story editor, he looked at the artwork we had of this tuxedo duck in a cape and a hat and a mask, and said, that's more like a pulp character, like Green Hornet or the Shadow. And that was my moment of, that gave me a different thing to play with, instead of James Bond and Moneypenny and M and Q and all that stuff, to suddenly say, oh, Doc Savage used to have a team of eccentric characters who helped him out, each with a specialty. For a while, very brief while, Double O Duck had a huge cast behind him. And then we kept paring it down, because the most important addition actually was giving him a daughter. The idea of this wild daughter who refused to stay at home, which was important to give the Disney heart. And the fact that he had to move to suburbia, for his daughter, and meanwhile had this spy career. We lost the right. We never had the rights to the name Double O Duck. We just kind of used it. And the people who did have the rights, who did the James Bond franchise, said you can't use it. They basically, cartoons had always done parodies and played with the double O, but the fact that Disney was taking out double page ads to promote the show, they thought that would be hurting the brand in too big a way, and had a contest. Alan Burnett, later went on to Batman, is the one who came up with the name Darkwing, and we took off from there. From there, it was, again, moved even away from pulp. Still had the spy stuff to finance things, but just embraced all the comic book side. And it was a ton of fun.
And Gargoyles had a similar sort of, light bulb moment when we had pitched the show to Michael Eisner as an adventure comedy, very much influenced by Gummy Bears. And Eisner hadn't liked it. He hadn't bought it, and but Gary Kreisel still thought there was something in the idea, so he told me to keep working on it. And I brought in a handful of people to show them the pitch and get feedback on it. And one of the people I brought in was Tad, and Tad had recently seen an early, I want to say, animatic of Beauty and the Beast before it was released, before any of us had seen it. And we already had our sort of female human friend of the Gargoyles, and he suggested, well, instead of having all these little funny gargoyles, what if you had one big gargoyle? Mm-hmm. And just as with, the light bulb from Dwayne on the Pulp character, for me, that put a light bulb up over my head because, again, my background wasn't funny animals. It was superheroes. So artist named Greg Guler and I created the character of Goliath, and we put the whole comedy show through the prism of Goliath and came out the other end with the show that people saw on television. And it became sort of it became a superhero show just without flagging that it was a superhero show. So no one in capes and tights or anything like that. But in essence, that was the genre we were doing. And that ended up working out great, except that we came up with so many ideas for the show that when we pitched it to Eisner a second time, he still passed on it. And Jeffrey told us to keep working on it. And I didn't know what to do at first because I'd pitched it as a comedy adventure show. It had been shot down. I pitched it as an action drama. It had been shot down. But I looked at the pitch and I realized the pitch, we'd lost focus. We had all these great ideas for the show, ideas that we ultimately did use in the show because you're doing 65 episodes. You need a lot of ideas. But for the pitch, we had lost that focus on that Beauty and the Beast relationship between Goliath and Elisa. So we focused the pitch on that. I cut tons of cards from the pitch so that it was a much shorter, much tighter pitch and much more focused on the two leads. And by that time, Beauty and the Beast had come out. And I don't know if you know this, but it was something of a hit for the Walt Disney. And so, pitched that to Eisner, and he said, sold. And Jeffrey turned to me after the pitch and said, you added a lot to that, didn't you? And of course, I hadn't added anything. I just cut stuff to focus it. But I said to him, yes, I did. And the
he
rest
added a lot of Greg Weisman heart to it. That's what he did. Desperation. Hey, Greg, I've got a question. I've never asked this before. Back when it was a Gummy Bears kind of show, was it set in medieval times or was it modern day?
No, it was the 90s, and the 90s buzzword that Gary kept talking about was edgy. Everything had to be edgy. So instead of being cute little multicolored bears, we had cute little multicolored monsters. And instead of this sort of vague pastoral medieval setting, that's where the show began in flashback, in essence. But it was the same structure. A spell was cast on them. It was a little more comedic, but a spell was cast on them, and they woke up in modern day Manhattan because we thought Manhattan was much edgier than the vague past, and we thought that little monsters would be much edgier than little bears. And so that's, even in the comedy development, the basic structure of the show was the same, which was
Were they still working for the police or in conjunction with?
They didn't really start working with the police. Elisa wasn't a police officer initially.
Okay.
When we first pitched the show, she was. She went through various different jobs. At one point, she was a librarian. At one point, she was a mom with 2 kids. At one point, she was a firefighter. She might have been a police detective at one point. But once we focused on her and Goliath, it became obvious that the police detective thing would work. but really the Gargoyles didn't start working with the police sort of in a upfront way until the Gargoyles comics from Dynamite. That wasn't something that was part of the original TV show. It's what's evolved since then.
So you can see, Amy, that development at TV animation was not a straight line affair. Very rarely was something pitched. And I remember we pitched Hercules, and it just had one muse, and Hercules and Phil, the satyr, and kind of, Eisner said, great, that's a show. But our new boss then, Dean Valentine, said, no, you don't have a show yet. And our kind of reaction was, what do you mean we don't have a show? You're boss. He's the boss of everybody. He said we had a show. But we had to go back in and really work, and he ended up in, a mythical high school. So, even when you've got a green light doesn't mean that you really have a green light until someone says, no, slow down, work all this stuff out. Where are you going to get your stories from? Pitch us some ideas. Okay, now you can go ahead.
I mean, we mentioned Aladdin earlier. I sold Aladdin with one art card, which was a picture of Genie and Aladdin, and 3 words, Aladdin, the series. And Eisner said yes. And I knew that was the approach to take with Eisner, because anything else I said, he might go, well, I don't know if I like that, or I don't know if I like,
Yeah.
But I pitched Aladdin the series. He said yes. And then Tad and Bob and Mark were able to just develop the version of Aladdin for television that they wanted to do without a lot of bother with the big time executives, and one of the lessons I've learned over and over again in development is, when it comes to pitching, selling, less is more, because you've got to give them just enough to get them to say yes, but anything more than that, and they start to get lost in the weeds and the details and things that you need for the show, but you do not need for the pitch.
Yeah, early on with Gary Kreisel, who was really responsible, I think, for building the organization of TV animation in those early days. And the company loved him because he treated Disney money as if it was his own. And we were almost punished for being efficient and hitting an impossible schedule, because then they'd say, when you were trying to get more weeks, the feeling was kind of like, well, no, they did it before, and but we struggled. But the nice thing about the early days is there'd be attention during development. Then Gary would be all over those first 3 scripts, giving you notes and all that to make sure you're doing the show that he liked. And then he had the rest of the division to run, so he'd go away. And it wouldn't be until usually anyway, it wouldn't be until some animation came back that they dive back in and saying, oh my God, what have you done? Or hopefully, hey, this looks great. We're geniuses. And then just before it goes on the air, there's always the possibility of a little panic. I think it was, I want to say DuckTales, but it might have been, makes more sense to be Winnie the Pooh. Maybe it was DuckTales that just before it went on, Michael Eisner started getting a little cold feet, or should we be doing this? Or it must have been Winnie the Pooh, makes more sense. But, went on, both became huge hits. But we really enjoyed those early days of, aside from on Darkwing's case, Greg, giving notes. Each show would have somebody in that position who knew the show, but was not part of the show to give notes. We were kind of left to our own devices. So we come up with weird ideas for stories, or in Greg's case, from that early pitch, you'd been thinking of, we're going to bring in these characters and they're going to do this kind of twist, and this is how it's going to be dramatic. And for the most part, you're left on your own, until somebody pays attention again. Whoops.
And those moments are fraught. when the swiveling spotlight finally shines on you again, you're like, oh shit, what happened?
At my table. Wow. So let's come to today now. So the initial spark of Gargoyles and Darkwing together, did someone at Dynamite come to you both and say, here's the idea?
Yeah, I was a guest on Nick's show. Uh, does he do that show weekly where he's doing original art
Yes.
and all that? So it was a weekly show. I was on that.
Yeah, I've
and
never
he
been a
chatted
guest
with
on that
me.
show.
Pardon me, what?
I've never been a guest on that show.
I'll have to bug him about that. Like
There you go.
Tad's been
Just
on there.
book
How come
yourself.
Greg hasn't?
Okay, there's no pay, Greg. It's
Oh, well, that's
anyway, it was Nick. We talked about Darkwing Duck, and of course, Dynamite had already had a huge Kickstarter with Gargoyles, and the show and the comics were doing great. Nick just out of the blue said, "Hey, do you ever think about doing a crossover with Darkwing Duck and Gargoyles?" And I laughed, and I kind of said, "If you can get Disney to agree to it," which I thought, why would they? They get antsy about Darkwing showing up in a DuckTales comic. Anyway, I said, you get them to agree to it, I'm sure Greg would be up for it because he really knows the character. He was part of Darkwing from the start. And that was it. And then suddenly, the official, hey, look what we're doing. Would you like to be a part of it?
Yeah.
I was shocked, but game for it.
Yeah, my editor, Nate Cosby, came to me and asked if I wanted to do it. And I said, if Tad's game for it, I'm game for it. So, and we co-plotted it. And then I did the script, and Tad then would weigh in with great suggestions, sometimes written, but sometimes sketched out. And I would incorporate those, and then Churro would do the art, and Tad I did some covers, and it's just been a lot of fun.
Yeah, often we get asked how we work with the artists, and we didn't work directly with Churro. Nate would show us, some pencil pages and things like that. I remember there were specific things about if you get too close to the cities, St. Canard and New York can look very much alike, which they're not supposed to. It's got to be more cartoony. And Greg, I remember, said, here's what we really need. And some of those early action poses gave notes. I gave a bunch of notes and drawings on Darkwing's hat and whether you see his forehead underneath the hat brim or stuff, silly stuff. And then, as Greg said, I do, gag drawings because it was easier to get the idea of, hey, here's this moment and you can really push it, which Greg then had to write detailed notes about eyes should bulge out, and, just trying to describe this visual gag because we didn't know whether Nate would hand in my drawings over to Churro or how Churro would respond to them. So on some of those, we're still waiting to see.
Thankfully, we won't have to wait too long because it's due to come out next month on the 14th. So it'll be a nice New Year's book that everyone can check out. I just wanted to clarify, are both of you writing the series, or is it more Greg?
We co-plotted it together.
Co-plotted it.
So,
Greg does the heavy lifting on the scripts, and then I basically act like I did on the Darkwing series, where I'm giving notes and suggestions, and it's always up to Greg to make the decision. Oh, that fits into what I was doing. I mean, we had one change. I went, well, we could, because we were told not to use a certain character parody, which did make sense to us, but whatever, time to deal with it. And I did like several pages of panels and all this, how this could work, just trying to work it out in my mind. But it was way too much, for the comic. And Greg would say, well, no, we can simplify it here. And, so
it was
we'd
a
go
great
back and forth
idea.
that
It just
way,
would have required 10 extra pages, and we didn't have those to spare. So we had to come up with something that, the original idea is still better, frankly. But we came up with something that I think is pretty funny, and
And there is even some
and
dramatic.
doesn't involve Disney being worried about a lawsuit. Yes.
There is even some dramatic notes I gave. Greg was having, from my perspective, a lot of fun writing the ducks because,
Mhm.
of course, he writes the gargoyles all the time. Uh, and I had to point out, well, wait, maybe Goliath should have a little hand in here, or here's a moment you set up that's really neat, and then it didn't pay off, and then it was kind of like, oh yeah, and then next draft through came out great. So it was a good back and forth.
Good.
Fun.
How does it feel writing these? Because it feels very separate, two completely different worlds, Darkwing and Gargoyle. So how does it feel writing these characters interact? Like, is it easier than you thought it would be, or is it a little bit more difficult?
It was pretty easy. I mean, one thing is that we're sort of, I mean, Darkwing never had a ton of continuity to begin with.
Yeah. And Darkwing had been to other worlds. Sometimes he popped up in a human world for, whatever was funny. So that's very flexible.
Gargoyles has intense continuity, but I'm sort of liberated from it because I just like, this isn't part of the straightforward Gargoyles continuity. In essence, in my mind, we don't have them coming from different universes. This isn't a multiverse story, but if someone is obsessive, like, well, how does this fit? Then my answer to that is, okay, there is a universe out there where Gargoyles and Darkwing exist. And a lot of what you've seen from Gargoyles happened in this universe, and a lot of what you've seen in Darkwing, the TV show and the comics, happened in this universe. But this is the one universe where both properties exist. But what that meant is I didn't really have to sweat, okay, how does this fit into this or anything like that. We just did it. And I think, you look at a property like Batman just as an example, and it's capable of doing Batman Brave and the Bold, the TV series, which is very, as Tad would say, Silver Age, fun kind of version of it, all the way to, The Dark Knight, which is, Frank Miller's super serious version of it. And anything in between. There's a lot of room for Adam West and, Christian Bale's, in Batman. And so it was sort of fun in a way to sort of say, okay, well, can Gargoyles have that range as well? And what we found is, yeah, sure. Particularly if you throw in a character like Darkwing, who's so outrageous, or so outraged all the time, and that sort of drags those characters forward. But the main villain of the piece is Demona, and she worked great because she's just got this sly sense of humor, and she could play into both the fun and the serious. And I think this was always true of Darkwing back in the day, and certainly of Gargoyles, is you want to make the danger feel real. Even with the humor, Gargoyles had comedy too, not as much as Darkwing, obviously, but we had humor because the feeling always is that humor offsets the serious stuff and vice versa. So, that doesn't mean that the danger shouldn't feel real. The danger to the characters, you want to feel like the threat matters. That we're not just, having a good time hanging around and oh yeah, there's a villain, but nothing really bad's going to happen. No, there are real stakes here, but we're having fun with them, and I think that's worked out great.
Yeah, it was important that the story hook, the drama, came from the Gargoyle side, because that gives a more serious bent.
Right.
There's plenty of goofy villains that could have gone the other way, but we didn't want to do a story where the Gargoyles cast is constantly saying, "Oh my God, a talking duck," or that kind of thing. It's just you don't want to constantly take the reader out of the action, so you just do it. And they, if how Goliath reacts to Darkwing is about his personality, not the fact that he's a duck, because Gargoyles seen all sorts of monsters. This is just one different monster, you know. And there are parallels between the universes in Demona, and then in, you know, the Darkwing world, we have his sometimes girlfriend, Morgana Macabre, and that was a click. But both heroes also have daughters. You know, there are different ways to go in this thing, and again, that's how we did the entire Darkwing series. You just do something, and everybody just treats it like this is the reality of the moment. And Negaduck, which you guys did a comic series of, started out as being Darkwing being split in two, a good side and a bad side. And I really liked Negaduck. And at the end, I told all my story editors, let's do more Negaduck stories. And they said, how can we do that? Does he keep getting split in two? And I said, no, nobody likes Posiduck. He's stupid, but I love Negaduck. And he said, how do we explain it? My answer was, you don't. Just do the stories, you know, and it worked out fine. That's pretty much how this ran too. You just, hey, we need to go to New York. Okay, get in the plane.
Right.
Nice. Would you like, so are there specific character combinations that were the most fun to write? Like, is Goliath and Darkwing interacting like the coolest part to write, or
we had a nice sort of, for most of the series, a nice sort of triumvirate in Goliath, Elisa, and Darkwing, and the playoff of that trio was a lot of fun. Then later in the issue, we also have, as Tad said, Morgana and Demona at the beginning. Later, you get more of a Morgana Elisa pairing, so you have the two girlfriends together. Mm-hmm. You also get some great Angela Goslin moments, I think, between the two daughters, but we weren't going out of our way too much to sort of say, who do we need to lock in together? You know, it was more like, how does the story play out with these characters? We've got a big reveal that I'm not going to give away in terms of the threat and the danger that comes in the last couple issues, but you know, we just had fun with whatever was there in the moment. So there's some really funny Bronx Launchpad stuff. It's not that Bronx and Launchpad are parallel characters in the series. It just worked out and they were funny together. So we did quite a bit with that. And just, you know, had a good time. But we didn't try to, lack of a better term, overthink it too much, you know, just whatever felt like it worked.
Nice. Before I do my next question, anyone who's watching out there, if you guys have a question for Tad or Greg or both of them, please put it in the comments. I'll pop it up because I think this is the perfect time if they've ever wanted to ask you something about either the shows or about the crossover. Was there back at Disney, was there ever plans to ever crossover shows? Just theoretically, was there ever any plans like that, or was like everyone just kept on their own shows in their own corners and just did their best?
I don't think so. I mean, trying to think back, because generally, especially in the syndicated shows, it's like these characters are in this show and it's being showed on this network, and this is going to syndication, this one's going to the other network, and you couldn't, you know, it was a bigger deal. It would be more like Marvel crossing over with DC as opposed to Marvel characters appearing in each other's books.
But I mean, you did you had Launchpad, you brought Gizmo Duck in over from DuckTales. On Aladdin, pitched a story that was loosely parroting Bonanza called The Sons of Poseidon, where you had Theseus and you had Polyphemus, the Cyclops, but you also had Triton. And it was going to be young Triton from Little Mermaid, but like if Triton was Little Joe.
Okay.
This was Hoss and Theseus was Adam. And I pitched that to Bob Schooley and Mark McCorkle, and they didn't go but we did the episode. We just, did Theseus without the other two Poseidon sons. So it wasn't really part of the game plan to cross those series over much. They all sort of, even the ones that were complementary towards each other, were all sort of existing in their own universes.
Mm-hmm.
But a big part of that again was scheduling.
Right.
It was like who had time to work that out. I did when Tad and I did Team Atlantis.
I was going to bring that up. Yeah.
Yeah, we had a Demona story set in 1921 before the whole show got
Eviscerated.
Yeah.
So,
We went from having 40 episodes to one movie that used
made it 3 episodes.
Episodes or something. Yeah. And so we were planning to do a Demona crossover set in the 1920s,
Nice.
which would have been fun. But we didn't actually call her Demona. Like, it was sort of like if you were a Gargoyles fan, you'd know who she was.
Mm-hmm.
And you know why she was alive in the 1920s. But if you had never seen Gargoyles ever, this was just the threat that the
Mm-hmm.
Team Atlantis gang was facing, back then. It does suggest, Tad, that we should pitch Dynamite on doing a Team Atlantis
That's true.
Gargoyles
That would
crossover
be cool. Yeah.
and use that story finally.
God. I think Bill Turner has a copy of every script.
I got a copy of that script at least. I also have the voice
that would
recording,
make it
'cause
very easy to write an ongoing series.
We recorded that episode before the show got killed. So we have it with Sheena Easton and Marina Sirtis, who played those characters, a couple characters in Gargoyles, plus all the cast of Team Atlantis. And I still have that on cassette because that's how long ago this was.
Jeez. I mean, so anyway, the crossover idea, it would seem natural, but even, I mean, there are some fans who get upset when I say that Darkwing and DuckTales, the series, are 2 different universes. And they say, Launchpad, he proves that they're the same universe. And I've always said, Launchpad proves that they're not the same universe because he's a good pilot in Darkwing. He's a lot stupider than he was in the original DuckTales. And I said, you guys don't know what alternate universes are. I always go back to Star Trek. When they go in the evil universe, there's an evil Spock, there's an evil Kirk, that's what it is. It's like, yes, there's a Scrooge and all of that. And that was not, at least back then, not a big deal when I brought in those. And I think because they were all ducks, nobody blinked an eye. Later on, it would have been a bigger deal. I know when Genie could morph into all sorts of things, I don't think he ever morphed into like gummy bears or, or Darkwing for that matter. If he did, I'm sure there'll be someone will have a screen grab of, oh yeah, what about this? But again, there is times when you're being watched very carefully, and there's a time when you're not, and those are the most fun things. I mean, Greg has a story working with Gary Kreisel about Gary checking in and saying, "So, how are things going?" And Greg pitched him all sorts of things that Gary said, "Well, you can tell the story, Greg." But Gary said, "Oh God, don't do that."
Gary took Frank Parr and I to lunch. Frank and I were the showrunners on Gargoyles, and he was actually apologetic at the beginning of the lunch, saying, "Hey, I've just been busy with all this other stuff, and I don't know what's been going on with the show, and I apologize for that. So, how's it been going?" We're like, "Great. What have you been doing on the show?" So we described a bunch of stuff, including Fox and Xanatos, who are 2 of our villains, getting married and having a baby. And he's like, "Oh, whoa, don't do that. Can't do that. We can't have the villains raising a kid. That's horrible. But you also can't take the kid away from them. That's a no-win situation. Don't do that." And there's this long pause as Frank and I look at each other, and then I turned to Gary and I said, "We already did it." And Gary there's another long pause, and I know what's going through Gary's head. There had been a couple shows, Bonkers was one of them, that had gone through a lot of creative challenges and a lot of problems, and so he had this option. He could, blow the whistle, set off a bunch of alarms, stop Gargoyles, and throw another show into crisis. And I watched literally as this wave of exhaustion rolled over him. And so he just sort of sighed heavily and said, all right, but don't dwell on it.
Mm-hmm.
And Frank and I were both like, oh, no, we won't dwell on it. I don't even know what that meant in that context, but we were like, of course not. We won't dwell on it. But it would have torn our whole show apart if he had insisted on changing it. But we just fortunately hit him at a moment where instead of kind of panicking and throwing the whole thing into disarray, he was just too exhausted to do that. So we got to go forward as planned. But and I think it was the right thing to do. And I think ultimately Gary would have seen that once he saw the details of it. But
I used to tell people
there's that very frightening moment when the
well,
whole show is at risk suddenly.
Yeah. I used to tell writers after we get notes early on in some of the early shows, sometimes I'd say, okay, this note don't do this note, ignore that note. Because sometimes it was, this is the kind of thing that bothers him in script. And I know when he sees it in animation, if not storyboard, he'll be fine with it. And it wasn't like I had a list of things. It was just having worked with him long enough to just get a sensibility that, there's sometimes with my animation background, I know this is going to work. No one will question it. It's just going to be there. But when you have it written down on the page, it's the wrong gears of your brain spinning. But for the most part, those are the golden years of light interference, because we didn't have network notes on our shows, because we were working for, in essence, Buena Vista Distribution, who had no say. Once Michael Eisner said, this is the show they're going to do, they had to promote it and put it on the air. And, if they had say in Gargoyles, I think specifically, in those days, they did not want continuity from show to show, because they wanted to be able to mix up episodes and all that. And they did. I know some station would play just a formula. You'd have Monday through Friday, and then on Saturday, they might play a Tuesday episode or a Tuesday from the previous week. Whatever their formula was, nobody was paying attention to content. That's how they would just mix things up, which, could puzzle a lot of people, On the other hand, in early days of comics, for me anyway, you picked up a comic book. It's your first comic book. The comic's been going on since 1938. And it's like, oh, I'm intrigued. Who's these characters? Well, this guy seems to be the editor, and here's the best friend of Superman. And that woman is Lois Lane, seems to suspect Clark Kent is Superman. What's going to happen there? And you just bought it. Later on, even in the deepest continuity years of Chris Claremont's X-Men, if you picked it up and there's this gorgeous artwork and the character drama is cool, it's like, I'm going to piece this together and maybe look for back issues or whatever. It was just, we couldn't do the crossover, stuff and all that. But, bringing some of those sensibilities, like the idea of a villain having a baby, it's like, I don't even know what that triggered him. It's like, no, having a villain who actually has more than a single, a two-dimensional life, to actually say, no, he's a father and, has this villainous intent. And it's like, well, no, that might impact his worldview of, kind of talking to a baby and looking out the window, all this will be yours as soon as I take it over, It's just, again, that's one of those things where you start watching the episodes, you don't question it at all.
It seems like especially comics stories today, that really is the go-to way to have something crossover. Would you guys like think it's the best way to make a crossover happen just through comics? I mean, we've seen it with DC and Marvel. I mean, and earlier this year, the Gargoyles met the Fantastic Four. So, like, is it really the best way to have something crossover and like it's less things to worry about, less elements to worry about?
It's definitely easier. If everyone is on board with the project, there are just fewer moving parts, is what it comes down to. So there's no doubt it's easier. I don't know if it's better or the best way or anything like that. I mean, if you're going to do Alien Predator, you probably want to see it on a big screen, I'm guessing. Not that it wouldn't be fun in comics, it would, but if given the choice. But obviously, it's a lot easier to do in comics. Certainly less expensive.
I mean, one of my favorite comics as a kid was World's Finest. It was bringing Superman and Batman together,
right?
Ignoring, weren't you irradiated by red kryptonite last week and turned into a blob? That wasn't talked about at all. It was just their adventure, within that. And the early days of Marvel, it was huge that, I think Spider-Man tried to join the Fantastic Four, in the first issue of his comic.
I mean, when I was a kid, I didn't even get that there were companies that you didn't cross the lines with. I'd see Batman team up with Green Lantern in a Brave and the Bold issue or something like that. And then I'd see an issue with Captain America teaming up with Iron Man. And for all I knew, in the next issue, Batman would team up with Captain America. I didn't know that. I didn't get that there were like companies, and some characters were owned by one company and some characters were owned by other. You get older and then you begin to realize, oh, I get it. This is DC. They have these characters. This is Marvel. They have these characters, and they don't get to cross over until they did. And Superman and Spider-Man crossed over.
That's true, yeah. And Muhammad Ali, but that was a different issue.
Right, yeah. But, but when you first are introduced to these kinds of things, I think when you're younger, you don't get the corporate side of it at all, which is a good thing, I think, and so, I think when we do these sort of crossovers, there's an element of not childish, but childlike fun to it, whether I'm crossing over Gargoyles with Fantastic Four, or crossing over Gargoyles with Darkwing, there's a fun, sort of childlike glee to doing that, at least for me. I hope for the readers too, but certainly for me, just because this is just cool, we get to cross these things over, and I don't have to sweat the continuity. I don't bother with that. I'm trying to do the current cast of Gargoyles with the current cast of Fantastic Four. The fact is Gargoyles is set in 1997 and Fantastic Four is set in 2025. I just ignore that.
Right.
Let's just have fun with these two casts, rolling into each other. Same with Gargoyles, Darkwing, obviously. And if we did another crossover, I'd be game for that too, because again, it's just fun. I love doing Gargoyles as Gargoyles, whatever the pure, whatever that means, just the solo property without other things coming in. That's still a great joy to me. But what fun is it to be able to do these crossovers? And I'd be game for more. I mean, I think we could have a lot of fun with a lot of different things. And now I'm kind of obsessing about the Team of Bananas thing.
I think the Dynamite has so many great licenses. I mean, there's some, when it comes to Darkwing Duck, there's a couple you have that are obvious that Darkwing could cross over with him, like some sort of ultimate crossover. And of course, I'm talking about, Darkwing Duck teaming up with Ursula and Cruella de Vil. It's just such a natural, comic that could happen. So maybe Nick should get on that.
We'll have to talk about
you guys have all sorts of titles that are just so much fun to put together. Why not?
I mean, we had the Thundercats and the Powerpuff Girls together. We didn't. No one thought it would work, but it did, and that was a really fun series to read. So it makes me excited to see.
The Mona Red Sonja sounds like a lot of fun. Do you guys still have Red Sonja? I can't. I'm not even sure.
Yes, we do.
So that'd be
and we've seen a lot of our characters. I mean, especially the Dynamite series. That's a lot of crossovers right there, just in itself.
Again, I'd be game for all that. It's fun, and again, it really appeals. I think, not necessarily saying that it's for younger readers. I just think it appeals to the child in all of us.
Agreed.
To just have these moments on the page, I think it's great.
Yeah, you answer those questions like, you go with who's stronger, who could beat who, Thing versus Help. And it's like, hey, here's a comic where the Thing and the Hulk are fighting, it's just a fun kind of thing. I mean, it's a huge game of what if, it's like, or I guess it's owned by Marvel, so we'll call it Dynamite's How About, how about if these different characters teamed up? Or like I say, a lot of these are just so natural that you wouldn't think twice about it.
All right. Before my last question, last chance for the audience to submit a question. But I think I'll leave it at if you guys could write one more crossover, like if you really want to see Gargoyles with a specific team or Darkwing Duck with a specific team, whether it's Disney or Marvel or DC, what would you guys have to see? What needs to exist?
Talking to us or the audience?
You guys.
Okay.
Sorry for the confusion. I was just
for me with Darkwing, it's a matter of give me the character. We can work anything. We did a parody of Twin Peaks called Twin Peaks, where it had such an unusual feeling to it, and we were very excited to do more like that. But we at that schedule we have to do the stories that people pitch to us, that we couldn't hold out for. We couldn't slow down enough to say, hey, remember we wanted to do more of those. But in comic opportunities, it's more like, you tell me Darkwing has to team up with Wolverine or
that'd be a book.
Daredevil or something like that. The hardest one would probably be like Deadpool. Just how funny you'd have to be to match his kind of thing. But it's really it's kind of a writer's paradise. I mean, it's a game where you throw me the character and we'll come up with a story. How many issues do we get, and then take it from there. And which way the parody would go would suit. I mean, take something like Wolverine, is so serious guy, but what if he ended up in a world of ducks? That's a totally different story.
I mean, I think almost anything you could have fun with. Turtles strikes me as an obvious Turtles pairing. It'd be fun to do Batman. It'd be fun to do Spider-Man. Or the two Spider-Men. I wrote Spectacular Spider-Man for 15 issues for Marvel, and it would be great to cross over Gargoyles with Spider-Man. We could have a lot of fun with that.
They're both in New York.
Yeah, and again, I'm now obsessed with doing the Gargoyles Team Atlantis thing that we never got to do on television. So it'd be a lot of fun.
It already sounds like fun. So that's all I had for today. But huge thanks to the both of you again for coming on and talking about the book, because I've been lucky enough to see you both separately and now together at the same time. It's been a honor and privilege for me. So thank you both.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, happy to be here. I mean, it's out in January, and I kept thinking like, oh, that's so far away. Oh, it's a couple of weeks now. Jeez.
Yep, But now it feels like I really do want to read the book. So like let's get a little closer to Christmas. Let's get a little closer to Christmas so the world can see the spectacular crossovers. I want to thank everyone for watching and saying hello. So I hope everyone goes to check it out. Was there anything else you guys wanted to plug before we log off?
Final issue of the Demona miniseries comes out shortly. So please check out issue 5 of Demona. And that's followed by the Gargoyles Winter Special written by Nate Cosby and me, which comes out also this month. And then, in January, Gargoyles, Darkwing Duck.
And I have another big project that is yet to be announced from Dynamite that may involve different universes. Who knows? But I'll let them announce. And I'm happy I get to do covers for all these things and always throw in my 2 cents worth on the content. So
I hope
stay tuned.
I hope I get to stay tuned. I hope I can see both of you again soon.
Sure.
I hope we can do another interview again soon.
No problem.
So, thank you both again. Thank you to everybody. I hope everyone has a great rest of the day. And check out Gargoyles and Darkwing Duck when it hits stores. It's stores next January. All right. Thank you guys.
Thanks.
Thanks.